Hey everybody, I'm Tim Mooney. I'm the director of the Timothy Mooney Repertory Theater, bringing one-man shows to schools, conferences, festivals all across the US and Canada. My one-man play, Moliere Than Thou, is my race through some of the funniest scenes and monologues in theatrical history. You can see Moliere Than Thou live online this Sunday and Monday, July 26th and 27th, 2020, and again September 27th and 28th. Sunday night shows at 9 p.m. Central Time are on facebook.com/Tim Mooney Rep, or you can see me Monday nights on Zoom with tickets available at calendly.com/Tim Mooney Rep. If you happen to be watching this video after those dates, you can always check my schedule of upcoming online and in-person performances at timmooneyRep.com. My goal in these videos is to double your ability to access, understand, and enjoy these plays. Check out my YouTube page, links up above, to find other stuff I have to say about Moliere, including the first in this Moliere series, I Finally Get Moliere, as well as full performances of some of these Moliere scripts, and hit like or subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss anything. I post these videos almost every Friday in advance of the Sunday, Monday performances. In that last Moliere Explainer video, I alluded to a controversy that surrounded Moliere's The School for Wives, noting that I'd spend more time on that scandal in a later video. This is that later video. 1662 was a big year for Moliere. He got married that year. That marriage was to be controversial in itself. As I mentioned last time, Moliere's father married a much younger woman, and Moliere himself also married a much younger woman. In fact, just the year before, in 1661, Moliere had written a comedy about older men who were marrying younger women, The School for Husbands, which was very similar to 1662's The School for Wives, which is the main topic of this video. The School for Husbands was about a young woman who tricks her guardian, who wants to marry her, into unwittingly marrying her off to the man who she really loves. Moliere got married at the age of 40. His new wife, Armande Bejart, was 19. Now, in our last Moliere video, you may have noticed the name Bejart. When Moliere started his own theater company in 1643, he started it in conjunction with a theatrical family that included Madeleine Bejart, with whom he had an early relationship. So then, who was Armande? Well, if you do the math, you may note that she was born right around the time that the company was forming, in the early days of Moliere's relationship with Madeleine. The signature under Mother on Armande's birth certificate is that of Madeleine's mother, which would make Madeleine and Armande sisters, though it is suggested that Madeleine's mother might have been beyond her childbearing years by this time, and most everyone thinks that Armande was actually Madeleine's daughter, and Madeleine's mother signed the birth certificate to save her daughter embarrassment for having a child out of wedlock. So then, who would have been Armande's father? There has been much speculation around this, and the curiosity about the timing of Armande's birth and Moliere's association with Madeleine made it convenient for Moliere's enemies to make a big deal out of it anytime they wanted to sully Moliere's reputation, which was often, by suggesting that Moliere had likely married his own daughter. This suggestion was only circulated by Moliere's enemies, of whom there were many, but no serious historian I've ever stumbled across has suggested this was true. What seems to me to be much more relevant, though, was that Moliere's relationship to Armande may have been a close parallel to that between the guardians and the wards, first in the School for Husbands and later in the School for Wives. They were both guardians working to get themselves married to their young wards, young women who had been in their care for an extended time, whom they had observed growing up, and whose characters they had to some degree shaped and molded in the process. And so, over those 2 years, Moliere was clearly writing about what was very much on his mind at the time, the joys and perils of marrying a woman much younger than himself, who he had known since she had been a child. And the fates of these two guardians in these two plays would also turn out to parallel his own experience, as marriage between Moliere and Armande was reportedly a little rocky. As a footnote, upon the birth of Molière and Armande's first child in 1664, King Louis XIV stepped in to be the godfather, which effectively put an end to most of the rumoring. The king had now given that relationship his official endorsement, and anybody who had a problem with the whole Molière-Armande issue would quickly find himself having a problem with the king. So, in the School for Wives, it's not the young female ward who tricks her guardian, but more that guardian manages to trick himself. Arnolphe has purposefully kept his ward Agnès in ignorance and to some degree stupidity. Arnolphe has come to the conclusion that it is intelligence that spoils women and turns their husbands into cuckolds. It's almost as if Arnolphe has watched the play The School for Husbands the year before and didn't get any of the jokes and took all the wrong lessons from it. By the way, you can see me performing a speech as Arnolphe from School for Wives and get a sense of just how funny and maybe frightening Molière can be at my performance this Sunday and Monday. Click like or subscribe. And so, when Agnès is still just 4 years old, Arnolphe sends her into a convent where she will be under strict control. In other words, she won't learn about boys there. Somewhere around Agnès' 18th birthday, she is brought out of the convent to live at the home of Arnolphe, who is often out on business trips, and Arnolphe has brought in 2 very ignorant servants to watch over her, assuming perhaps that their ignorance will likewise keep her from learning about boys. I think you can guess where this is going. In the meantime, it is important to note that Arnolphe is a bit of a pretender. He has adopted a second name. Like many of the merchant class of the time, he envied the ruling class and wanted to carve out a title for himself. This was a bit of a fad in France at the time, and King Louis XIV had begun doing a little pushback on the whole assumed title routine. He was rebuking merchant class folks who were starting to call themselves the Lord of this or that, and knocking them down a peg or two. In fact, he had recently done this to Thomas Corneille. If that name sounds familiar, he was brother of Pierre Corneille, who was a very famous playwright at the time. His brother Thomas was a lesser-known playwright, but they were both very popular with a competing theater company, the Grands Comédiens of the Hôtel de Bourgogne. So, was Molière attacking his crosstown rivals? They certainly thought that he was. Arnolphe had given himself the title of Monsieur de la Souche. Monsieur de la was itself a title roughly equivalent to the Lord of. In fact, the king's brother was generally known as Monsieur, and when Molière's troupe was adopted by the king's brother, they took on the title of the Troupe du Monsieur. But then there was that whole souche part of the title. Well, it turns out in French, a souche is essentially a tree stump. And Arnolphe had a rather well-worn tree stump in his yard. It was such a landmark in the neighborhood that when it came time to make himself a title, he decided to go around calling himself the Lord of the Stump. Molière mocks this by citing another merchant who dug a trench around his land, filled it with water, and called himself Monsieur de l'Île, or the Lord of the Island. But what matters about this new identity was that when Horace, probably pronounced Horace in French, falls in love with a beautiful girl hanging out on the second-floor balcony of Arnolphe's house, he learns that she is being kept under the care of Monsieur de la Souche. Horace knew Arnolphe. His father was best friends with Arnolphe, and Horace, newly moved to Paris, does not know that Agnès is in Arnolphe's care. Again and again, Horace keeps bumping into Arnolphe in the street, and they talk like old friends about life and love, and Arnolphe lends him money and wheedles out of him the news that yes, there is a girl that he's set his sights on, but that no, she seems to be cruelly kept under the watchful eye of somebody named La Souche. And again, Horace mistakenly tells Arnolphe all about his plans to flirt with, to court with, and eventually to elope with Agnès. And yet no matter what Arnolphe does to counter these plans, he only makes it worse for himself. Because While Arnolphe kept Agnès in ignorance about relations between the sexes, she also, in the process, did not learn about not falling in love. And so, when love showed up in her life, as it must, she did not know not to respond. And so, School for Wives feels in some ways like a Greek tragedy. Arnolphe is flying headlong into his terrible fate, knowing at each step along the way what problems are coming up, and everything that he does to counter those problems only seems to make it worse. School for Wives was Moliere's first big success. Lots of people came to see it and loved it. And its popularity only angered the theatrical competition in town even more. And they attacked the play whenever they could, suggesting that there was very little action, the speeches were too long, that it failed to hew closely enough to Aristotle's unities, the unities of time, place, and action. This was the neoclassical era, and they at least pretended to care about these things. Moreover, those comédiens produced plays to demonstrate what a bad playwright Molière was and what a bad play The School for Wives was. They produced a play ironically titled The Panegyric of the School for Wives. Molière responded with another play, The Critique of the School for Wives, in which he depicts a bunch of people gathering at a post-theater soiree, sneering over the supposed vulgarity of the School for Wives. Only one character stands up for Molière, countering their snooty assumptions with a speech which might give you a sense of how these arguments went. This one is from my own rhymed adaptation of this play. I have 17 of these Molière adaptations available for study and production at MoliereInEnglish.com. You people are so funny with your rules, with which you make the rest of us seem fools, or else you make a cacophonic clang out of your tirades and your long harangue. One might well think they were, to hear you speak, some holy grail for which we all so seek. And yet these consecrated explanations are nothing more than simple observations of pleasures found through that dramatic act. Those same observers might well note, in fact, the very things that interest us or bore us without reference to Aristotle or to Horace. It seems to me these rules are superseded by one great rule which must perforce be heeded. And here, held up beyond each single measure, is that the work of art must give one pleasure. And any work which has attained this aim must of necessity transcend such claim. Do all these critics somehow so suppose that no one in the public rightly knows enough about what's wrong or what is right, whereby they might assess their own delight? In response, the comédiens produce a play called The Painter Painted, which depicts a thinly disguised Molière under the name Elomire. Yes, it's an anagram. And Molière responds, again, with The Rehearsal at Versailles, in which Molière apparently does a very dead-on impression of the comédien's lead actor, Montfleury. If you know your French theater, you may know that Cyrano de Bergerac also mocked Montfleury mercilessly for being kind of a pretentious, pompous, overacting ham. This was like the editorial and the op-ed of the day. You can imagine them attending each other's performances, furiously planning out their rebuttals, even as the performances were ongoing. So that's the tale of I finally get the School for Wives. Please leave comments and more questions in the space below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like or subscribe to this channel. There's more that I'll be covering. Come check out Moliere Than Thou, Sunday, July 26th on Facebook, or on Monday, July 27th on Zoom, all at 9 p.m. Central Time. Tickets for Monday night shows are $5 and available at calendly.com/Tim Mooney Rep. The show is also available to come to your school, conference, or theater, or I can perform for your group online. We are a not-for-profit group dedicated to inspire, inform, educate, and entertain. We have a Patreon campaign. You can sign on for as little as $1 a month and pick up some fun swag in the process, or you can make a direct one-time donation at timmooneyRep.com. The play is also available as a book And I've also published The Big Book of Moliere Monologues, which gives an even more thorough overview of Moliere's life, plays, and characters. You can pick it up online and find loads more at timmooneyRep.com. Thanks a lot. See you on the stage.